The fluorescent lights hummed softly in the hospital corridor as Margaret Williams smoothed her worn scrubs and checked her watch. 3 more hours until her shift ended, and then she'd head to her second job at the diner downtown. At 52, she'd been a nurse for over 20 years, and while the work had grown more demanding, her compassion had only deepened with time. She paused at the water fountain, taking a moment to rest her tired feet. The emergency room had been particularly busy that evening. A car accident, 2 heart attacks, and a steady stream of worried families filling the waiting room. Margaret had learned long ago that healing wasn't just about medicine. It was about seeing people when they felt most vulnerable, most afraid. That's when she noticed him. A man sat hunched on the bench near the emergency entrance. His clothes tattered and stained. His dark hair was unkempt and his jeans bore holes that spoke of hard times. He held a small paper bag close to his chest, and something about his posture, the way his shoulders curved inward, told Margaret he was carrying more than just physical discomfort. Margaret approached slowly, her nursing instincts taking over. She'd seen plenty of people in similar situations over the years. Sometimes they were patients who couldn't afford proper care. Sometimes they were family members who'd spent their last dollar getting to the hospital. Either way, they deserved kindness. "Excuse me," she said gently, settling beside him on the bench. "Are you waiting to be seen?" The man looked up and Margaret was struck by his eyes, dark and intelligent, but filled with a weariness that seemed to go deeper than physical exhaustion. I'm not sure I belong here," he said quietly. "I don't have insurance and I know how expensive everything is." Margaret nodded understandingly. "What's troubling you?" He gestured to his wrist, which was clearly swollen. "I think I might have sprained it pretty badly. Fell off my bike a few hours ago. I've been sitting here trying to decide if I should just go home and deal with it." "Let me take a look," Margaret said. And when he hesitated, she added, "I've been a nurse for 23 years. I won't hurt you." His name was David, she learned, and as she gently examined his wrist, she could see it was indeed badly sprained, possibly fractured. But more than that, she could see the shame in his eyes. The shame of a man who felt he didn't deserve care simply because he couldn't pay for it. "David," she said softly, "I want you to know that everyone deserves medical attention when they're hurt. That includes you." Over the next hour, Margaret worked quietly behind the scenes. She spoke with Dr. Patterson, who agreed to see David without charge. She found a voucher for X-rays from the hospital's charity fund, and when David mentioned he hadn't eaten all day, she brought him a sandwich from the staff lounge, her own lunch. Actually, though, she didn't tell him that. "Why are you being so kind to me?" David asked as she helped him with the paperwork. "You don't even know me." Margaret paused, thinking of her own struggles. The bills that never seemed to end, the double shifts that left her exhausted, the way she sometimes fell asleep still wearing her shoes. "Because," she said simply, "we're all just trying to make it through this world as best we can. Sometimes we need a hand. Sometimes we're able to offer one. Today I'm able to offer one." The X-rays showed a hairline fracture. Dr. Patterson fitted David with a cast and gave him some pain medication samples. As he prepared to leave, David turned to Margaret. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "I mean it. You didn't have to do any of this." "Take care of yourself," Margaret replied. "And David, when you're back on your feet, remember this feeling. Remember that someone cared, and maybe someday you'll be able to pass it on." David nodded, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I will, I promise." Margaret watched him walk away into the evening, then returned to her duties. She finished her shift, drove to the diner, and worked until midnight, serving coffee and pie to late-night customers. It was the kind of day that left her bones aching and her heart full, the paradox of a life spent in service to others. 3 weeks passed. Margaret had mostly forgotten about David, though she sometimes wondered if his wrist had healed properly. The emergency room had its usual parade of humanity, and she gave each person the same careful attention she'd given him. Then, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, she noticed a familiar figure in the waiting room, but this time David looked completely different. He wore a well-tailored suit, his hair was neatly styled, and he carried himself with quiet confidence. Margaret blinked, wondering if she was mistaken. "Margaret?" David approached the nurse's station, and she saw it was indeed him. The same kind eyes, the same gentle voice. "David, you look... well, how's your wrist?" "Healed perfectly, thanks to you." He paused, seeming nervous. I wonder if I could speak with you privately. Maybe when your shift ends? Margaret's curiosity was piqued, but she had patients to attend to. I get off at 6, she said. There's a coffee shop across the street. At 6:15, Margaret found David waiting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. He stood as she approached, and she noticed his hands were shaking slightly. Please sit, he said. I have something to tell you, and I'm not sure how to begin. Margaret settled into her chair, studying his face. You're making me nervous, David. Is everything all right? More than all right, he said, then took a deep breath. Margaret, I need to tell you who I really am. My full name is David Harrison. I'm the CEO of Harrison Technologies. Margaret's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. Harrison Technologies. She'd heard of it, of course. Everyone had. It was one of the largest tech companies in the country. I don't understand, she said slowly. 3 weeks ago, I was going through a very dark time, David continued. I'd lost my wife to cancer 6 months earlier, and I was questioning everything about my life. I'd given away most of my belongings, was living in a small apartment, riding a bike instead of driving. I was trying to understand what life was like for people who didn't have the privileges I'd always taken for granted. Margaret listened, her heart beginning to understand. When I fell and hurt my wrist, I could have gone to any private hospital, could have paid for the best care. But I wanted to see what happened if I was just nobody, just a man who needed help. And what did you find out? Margaret asked gently. I found you, David said simply. I found someone who looked at a broken-down stranger and saw a human being worth caring for, someone who gave her own lunch to a hungry man, who used her own influence to help someone who couldn't help himself. You treated me with more dignity and kindness than I'd experienced in years. Margaret felt tears welling up. David, you don't understand. What I did, that's just who I am. It's what anyone would do. No, David said firmly. It's what you would do. And that's what made me realize I wanted to rebuild my life around people like you. People who understand that real wealth isn't measured in dollars. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. Margaret, I know this is unconventional. I know we've only met twice. But these past 3 weeks I haven't been able to stop thinking about you, about your kindness, your strength, your beautiful heart. Margaret's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was a simple card with elegant handwriting. Would you consider having dinner with me? Not as a patient and nurse, but as 2 people who might have a chance at finding something wonderful together. I'm not asking you to change your life, David said quietly. I'm asking if you'd let me be part of it. I want to learn from you, Margaret. I want to understand what it means to live with the kind of generosity you showed me. Margaret looked across the table at this man who had disguised himself as someone broken, only to discover that he was actually seeking to be whole. She thought about her life, the long hours, the financial struggles, the loneliness of coming home to an empty apartment. But she also thought about the fullness she felt when she helped someone, the way her heart expanded when she could make a difference in someone's day. She thought about the look in David's eyes when she'd treated him with simple human kindness. I would like that, she said softly. I would like that very much. As they talked through the evening, Margaret realized that sometimes the most profound connections happen when we're not trying to impress anyone, when we're simply being ourselves. David had found her not because of who she was trying to be, but because of who she truly was. And in that small coffee shop, as the evening light faded and their conversation deepened, 2 souls who had both been seeking something true finally found it. In each other, in the simple miracle of human kindness, and in the beautiful possibility of love that sees beyond the surface to the heart beneath. Sometimes, Margaret thought, the most valuable things in life can't be bought or sold. They can only be given freely and without expectation from one heart to another.